If you've ever wondered what would happen if the deadliest predator in the galaxy bowed not to the alien warlords who claimed it, but to a single human, you're in the right place. Stick around to find out how one man turned the galaxy upside down. And before we begin, don't forget to like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more stories where humanity proves it's anything but ordinary. The hall of the war summit pulsed with heat and disdain. Alien banners hung like scars across the vaulted chamber, each symbol representing a clan whose history was soaked in conquest. Towering bodies lined the obsidian floor, their armor clinking as they shifted to sneer at the single human who stood in their midst. Captain Marcus Hale did not flinch. He had fought on battlefields where artillery rained down like hail and had seen men die screaming in mud. The sneers of alien chiefs were just another kind of noise. He was not tall by their standards nor heavily armed. His earth-made uniform seemed fragile beside the thick-scaled hides and steel-plated mantles of the war chiefs. To them, he looked like prey that had wandered into the den of wolves. Marcus knew this was exactly what they wanted to believe. The Galactic Council had demanded Earth send a representative to prove its worth in the hierarchy of civilizations, and the war chiefs had scented weakness in that request. The first chief, a jagged-toothed brute whose name carried like thunder, leaned forward from his throne. "This is your envoy? This frail animal? His bones would splinter beneath the weight of our youngest hunters." His voice was guttural, each syllable rolling with the promise of violence. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Others joined in, voices layered with mockery, tails thudding against the floor, mandibles clacking. Marcus stood silent, eyes steady. The urge to respond rose in his chest, but he forced it down. Every word had to be chosen carefully. One slip and humanity would be dismissed as weak forever. "I am Captain Marcus Hale," he said finally, his voice measured and carrying across the chamber. "I am not here to measure my bones against yours. I am here to speak for a people who have endured storms, famines, predators, and each other. We do not claim to be the strongest. We claim to endure. And endurance, chiefs, often outlasts strength." The room stilled for a heartbeat, the chiefs trading glances. Then another voice cut through, dripping venom. "Endurance? A fine word for prey that cannot fight back. Tell me, human, how long do you endure in the jaws of a predator?" The chief gestured, and from the far end of the chamber came the low, shuddering growl of a cage being dragged forward. Chains clinked, links as thick as Marcus's wrist. The war chief's eyes gleamed with cruel delight. Inside the cage, something massive stirred. The Vorkath. Even the name was whispered with reverence in council records. The apex predator of the Outer Rim worlds, said to have devoured entire hunting parties armed with plasma rifles. Its hide shimmered like scaled iron, its muscles coiled with dreadful patience. A ridge of bony spikes lined its back, and its eyes burned with primal intelligence. Marcus's breath caught despite himself. The Vorkath was not an animal, it was a living engine of destruction. One chief rose, extending a claw toward the human. "If you wish to claim humanity's worth, then prove it here and now. Step into the pit. Let us see if your endurance buys you more than a heartbeat of mercy." The others howled in approval, stomping their feet, slamming weapons on the floor. To them, this was entertainment, a chance to watch a fragile envoy be reduced to crimson paste. Marcus's stomach nodded, but his face did not betray it. He had walked into ambushes before, into firefights where odds were worse than hopeless. This was no different, except the enemy wasn't men with rifles. He thought of Earth, of wolves once considered untamable until men walked beside them as companions. He thought of horses, wild and furious, that humans had turned into partners in war and exploration. And deeper still, he thought of the quiet moment from his youth, a wounded wolf pup snarling in a snare, and his younger self crouching, hand outstretched, waiting through the growls until the animal no longer saw an enemy but a rescuer. Marcus exhaled slowly. "I accept." The chamber hushed. Chiefs leaned forward, jaws slack with surprise, some grinning at the thought of bloodshed, others intrigued by the sheer audacity. The cage doors groaned open. The Vorkath's chains rattled as handlers drove it forward with electrified prods, though even through the jolts it moved with terrifying grace, jaws snapping at the air. Marcus stepped down from the envoy's platform into the pit below. Each footfall echoed against the stone floor, his figure dwarfed by the massive creature that loomed ahead. The beast's breath came in hot gusts, its eyes narrowing to slits of molten gold as it fixed upon him. Behind him, laughter swelled again. "Yes, walk closer, little human," a chief bellowed. "Let us see endurance." Marcus ignored them. Every muscle in his body screamed to run, every instinct insisted he was prey. But he held his ground, lifting his hands slowly, palms open. His voice came low, steady, a tone not meant for chiefs but for the beast. "I'm not here to fight you," he murmured. "I'm not your enemy." The Vorkath growled, chains snapping taut as it lunged, jaws stopping just short of Marcus's chest. The shock wave of its breath nearly staggered him, but he did not move back. He took one deliberate step forward instead, eyes never breaking from the creature's gaze. The chiefs roared in delight. To them it was the prelude to slaughter. Marcus heard none of it. He focused only on the predator before him, on the tremor in its muscles, the way its gaze flickered not only with hunger but with something more primal, curiosity. "Easy," he whispered. "I know what it means to be chained. I know what it means to be forced." The Vorkatha's ears twitched. Its growl lessened, replaced by a rumbling sound, not rage but something uncertain. Marcus lowered himself slowly, one knee pressing into the stone floor, his hand extended forward, palm open. The silence stretched thin as glass. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the predator shifted, muscles rippling, claws scraping against stone. With a guttural snort, it lowered its head, massive snout brushing against Marcus's outstretched palm. The contact was light, tentative but undeniable. The entire chamber froze. 1,000 eyes widened. Chains rattled as the Vorkath bent its massive frame lower, the gesture unmistakable. It was bowing. The first chief's laughter died in his throat. Others muttered in disbelief. This could not be. The Vorkath bowed to no one, not even to them. Marcus's palm rested against the beast's warm hide, his breathing slow, his eyes still locked with its golden gaze. He did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply whispered, "Thank you." The silence shattered into chaos, shouts, curses, howls of outrage. The chiefs rose from their thrones, fists clenched, spines rigid with fury. Marcus stayed kneeling beside the predator, unshaken, knowing in that moment that the balance of power in the chamber had shifted. The Vorkath remained bowed, its allegiance declared without words. The deadliest predator in the galaxy had chosen. And it had chosen a human. The stunned silence lingered like smoke over the chamber. Even the echo of the Vorkatha's chains subsided, leaving only the sharp sound of its breath and the racing pulse in Marcus Hale's ears. The beast's massive skull pressed against his hand with the strange gentleness of something that should not be capable of restraint. Every instinct in the war chief screamed that this was wrong, unnatural, even blasphemous. Yet there it was, the galaxy's most feared predator bending its head to a human. The High Chief's eyes burned with fury. He rose from his seat, his spined armor catching the torchlight. "Trickery," he snarled, voice rolling across the chamber. "Some device hidden in his skin. Some sorcery from the prey world. This is no triumph of will, it is deception." Marcus kept his palm on the Vorkatha's hide, feeling the rumble of its chest as it exhaled. He knew any sudden withdrawal would break the fragile moment. He had dealt with fear before and the secret was always the same, never show it. His voice, when he spoke, was calm and low but clear enough to carry. "You saw what I did. No device. No trick. I showed respect and it responded." The chiefs erupted into overlapping shouts. Their massive forms loomed over their thrones, tusks bared, mandibles snapping. Some spat on the floor in disgust. Others muttered in disbelief, eyes flicking nervously toward the predator as if it might turn on them next. Marcus could feel the fragile balance slipping, curiosity curdling into outrage. The Vorkath shifted, rising slightly, its golden eyes scanning the hall. The chains attached to its collar groaned with strain. Handlers tried to pull it back, their electrified prods sparking, but the beast growled and not one dared get close. It was no longer theirs to command. A smaller chief, his carapace striped with war paint, leaned forward. "You shame us, human. You claim what is not yours. That creature has been the symbol of our clans for generations. It kneels to our warlords alone." His voice dropped into something almost pleading. "It cannot kneel to you." Marcus rose slowly, keeping a hand resting on the predator's neck. His eyes moved from one chief to another. "Maybe that is why it does. You demand submission with chains and pain. You mistake fear for loyalty. Where I come from, the greatest bonds are not forged by force but by trust. This creature understands that better than you." The words hung heavy and Marcus knew they cut deep. The chiefs thrived on domination, on the idea that only strength commanded respect. To be told they had mistaken cruelty for strength was a wound they could not allow to fester. The High Chief slammed a clawed fist against the arm of his throne, the sound like stone shattering. "Enough." His voice was thunder. "If this human dares claim our beasts bow freely, Then let him prove it not once but again, and again, until all doubt is stripped away. The chiefs roared approval. Some grinned with malice, already anticipating the spectacle. Marcus knew then that he had walked into a trap that was only tightening. They would not allow a single anomaly to challenge centuries of ritual. If one predator bowed to him, they would unleash others, until either he was torn apart, or the miracle shattered under weight of repetition. The Vorkath growled as if sensing the storm building around them. Marcus felt the vibration of its chest beneath his palm. He looked into its eyes, saw the faint flicker of recognition there, something beyond animal instinct. A memory stirred in him, of the wolf pup years ago, its paw caught in steel. How long had he crouched in that clearing, hand outstretched, waiting while the animal snarled and bled? Hours maybe. Long enough for fear to soften into something else. Trust had come slowly, but once it was there, it had never broken. He whispered, not for the chiefs but for the predator. I won't leave you. The beast rumbled, low and steady as if acknowledging him. The high chief raised his arms, signaling for silence. The human will enter the proving arena. There he will face not one beast but many. If his words are true, if he commands respect rather than fear, then he will live. If not, his jagged teeth gleamed. He will endure as prey endures. Briefly. The assembly thundered with approval. Marcus's stomach tightened, but he forced himself to remain still. He had known this wouldn't end with a single bowed head. The chiefs had their pride. To them, humiliation was a wound deeper than any blade. They would make the arena his grave, and they would relish watching it happen. The Vorkath pulled at its chains again, a violent jerk that sent one handler sprawling. Its eyes never left Marcus. He could feel its impatience as if it wanted to follow him wherever he went. Strange, he thought, how quickly the bond had formed. But he also knew bonds forged under pressure were the strongest. He raised his voice once more, carrying it across the hostile chamber. If this is your test, then I'll face it. But remember what you saw here tonight. No matter what happens next, you cannot unsee the truth. The chiefs bristled, but none could deny it. They had all seen the bow. They had all felt the weight of the silence when predator and human touched without bloodshed. It gnawed at them even if they pretended otherwise. Marcus withdrew his hand slowly. The Vorkath gave a guttural sound, half growl, half protest, but it did not lunge. It lowered its head once more briefly before handlers finally dared to tug it back toward its cage. Its golden eyes lingered on Marcus even as the bars closed again, a promise made without words. The war chiefs turned away in unison, snarling their commands to attendants. Preparations would begin immediately. The proving arena awaited, and with it the next stage of the trap. Marcus drew a steadying breath. He knew he had only bought time, not victory. But he also knew something the chiefs did not. In the briefest moment, predator and human had understood one another. That bond, fragile though it was, could change everything. The chains clattered as the Vorkath was dragged from sight. The chamber dimmed, the thunder of alien laughter filling the air once more. Marcus stood alone at the pit's center, his figure dwarfed by stone and shadow, yet unbowed. He had touched the impossible and lived. And that meant the impossible could happen again. The arena stank of blood and scorched metal. Stone walls rose in a brutal circle around the pit, their surfaces gouged with the claw marks of creatures that had torn themselves against them in desperate frenzy. Above, tiered platforms overflowed with alien spectators, their chants reverberating like thunder. The war chiefs sat highest of all, their armored silhouettes framed by banners, eyes glittering with anticipation. Marcus Hale stepped into the pit with measured strides, his boots crunching against sand still darkened from earlier contests. He carried no weapon. They had denied him even the simplest blade, insisting a true bond with a predator needed no steel. His hands hung at his sides, empty but steady. His heart pounded, but he let no sign of fear slip. He knew the crowd was watching for weakness, waiting for the flinch that would confirm his species' inferiority. The gate on the far side rattled open. A guttural roar exploded into the air as the first predator lunged through, a creature smaller than the Vorkath but no less lethal. Its lean frame bristled with spines, saliva dripping from serrated jaws. It landed in the sand with a thud, tail lashing as it fixed on Marcus. The chiefs leaned forward, grins flashing. They expected the human to freeze. Marcus did not move. He studied the predator's stance, the twitch of its muscles, the glint of recognition in its eyes. This beast was no stranger to battle. It had been driven mad by abuse and conditioning. It knew only to charge and tear until ordered otherwise. The creature launched forward in a blur of muscle. Marcus pivoted sharply, sand kicking up as he rolled aside. The predator's jaws snapped shut inches from where he had stood. The crowd roared in delight at the near kill, voices blending into a storm of sound. Marcus rose, calm despite the surge of adrenaline. He whispered under his breath, the words carrying no meaning to the crowd but steadying his own resolve. "You're not my enemy. You're theirs." The predator circled, snarling, but Marcus noticed something. Its eyes darted toward the war chiefs above with every feint, waiting for a command. It was bound not by instinct but by the constant terror of its master's expectations. A prod of electricity lashed from the sidelines, goading the beast into another charge. This time Marcus didn't dodge. He dropped low, kicking up sand into its eyes. The creature screeched, blinded, and stumbled past him. Marcus leapt to the side, placing himself directly between the beast and the chief's platform. The predator blinked furiously, sight returning. Its gaze fell upon Marcus again but then hesitated. For a breath, its focus shifted upward, toward the very figures that had forced it into the arena. Marcus held still, waiting. The chiefs shouted in rage, barking commands. One slammed a fist, ordering the handlers to drive the creature forward. Shock prods jabbed against its hide, and it yelped, fury reigniting. But in that brief hesitation Marcus saw the truth. The beast didn't hate him. It hated its chains. The second gate clanged open. A larger predator lumbered into the pit, a quadruped with armored plates jutting from its shoulders, its maw wide enough to crush a man whole. The crowd erupted again, the air thick with bloodlust. Marcus felt sweat bead at his temple. 2 predators now and the promise of more. The smaller one circled left, the plated brute to the right, herding him between them. Marcus's breath came faster, but his mind remained sharp. He remembered Earth's predators, how wolves hunted in packs, how lions circled prey until the moment of collapse. He wasn't prey, not yet. The armored brute lunged. Marcus dived aside, barely escaping its jaws. Sand scraped his palms raw, but he rolled back to his feet. The smaller predator charged again, claws raking across his sleeve as he twisted away. Pain seared his arm, shallow but stinging. The crowd howled, the chiefs grinning at the blood. Marcus staggered, then deliberately stopped running. He stood tall in the sand, chest heaving but eyes unbroken. Both predators slowed, puzzled by the sudden lack of flight. Predators thrived on fear, on prey's desperation. He offered them neither. "Look at me," he said softly, voice lost in the roar but clear to himself. "I won't hurt you. I won't chain you. I just won't run." The armored brute rumbled uncertainly, pacing instead of charging. The smaller predator tilted its head, a low growl rumbling from its throat but without the same frenzy as before. The chiefs above barked louder, furious at the faltering display. Then the third gate burst open. The Vorkath. The crowd's cheer became a wave of awe and terror. The beast stormed into the arena, golden eyes blazing, chains dragging uselessly from its collar. The handlers outside shouted in panic. It had broken its restraints. It moved with terrifying grace, each step shaking the sand. Marcus's breath caught. The bond they had shared earlier flared alive again in those eyes. The beast strode past the handlers, past the prods, ignoring everything but him. It lowered its head, massive snout brushing Marcus's shoulder. The arena fell deathly silent. The other 2 predators froze. Their snarls quieted, their bodies shrinking back. One whined, crouching low, as though recognizing a greater authority. The Vorkath gave a single growl, deep and resonant, and the 2 predators retreated further, no longer circling Marcus but keeping distance. The war chiefs erupted in rage. Some leapt from their seats, weapons drawn, shouting for the handlers to kill the beasts. But none dared move into the pit. The sight was too unnatural, too dangerous. 3 predators, all cowed by the presence of the human and his chosen ally. Marcus lifted his hand and laid it against the Vorkatha's neck once more. He whispered, steady, certain, "I told you I wouldn't leave." The beast rumbled, pressing closer, and the crowd gasped in disbelief. Above, the high chief slammed his fist, his voice cracking like a storm. "This is treachery. No beast chooses prey. He has bewitched them. Guards, kill him." The order snapped the spell of silence. Armored soldiers moved along the edge of the arena, weapons primed. Handlers jabbed at their prods in panic, but none dared descend into the sand. The predators stood united, their eyes glowing with a new and dangerous intent. Marcus knew the moment was balanced on a knife's edge. The chiefs would never forgive this humiliation. They would paint it as trickery, as theft, anything but what it was. And yet, the truth was already spreading through the crowd. They had seen it with their own eyes. The predators obeyed him, not the warlords. The Vorkatha's roar shook the walls, a sound that drowned the chaos. Marcus stood at its side, blood on his arm, breath ragged, yet unbowed. The chiefs had demanded proof and they had it. But proof was never enough for those whose power rested on lies. Marcus realized then that survival alone would not be the battle. The true war would be against the pride of those who ruled, and the storm was already gathering. The guards hesitated on the ledges, their weapons trained but their courage faltering. Below them, 3 predators crouched in the sand, their eyes fixed not on Marcus Hale but on the figures who had commanded them for generations. The Vorkatha's roar still reverberated through the arena, the sound so immense that even the stone beneath Marcus's boots seemed to quiver. The High Chief's order had been clear, yet none of the soldiers moved. They all understood the risk. To descend into that pit was to step into the reach of death itself. Marcus stood tall beside the Vorkath, his bloodied arm hanging limp at his side. He felt every gaze in the arena on him, thousands of eyes that had expected his bones to be scattered in the sand by now. Instead, they were seeing something none of them could explain. He could feel the tide shifting, not in victory not yet but in doubt. And doubt, he knew, could be the beginning of collapse. The High Chief roared in frustration, drawing a massive blade from his belt. "Cowards! If my soldiers will not act, then I will carve the truth myself." His armor clattered as he strode down the steps, his hulking frame making the sand quake with each footfall. The crowd erupted, half in cheers, half in gasps of disbelief. Few had ever seen a chief fight in the pit. Marcus's pulse raced but he did not step back. He knew the beast beside him was watching, waiting for his command. That realization startled him. He had not tamed the Vorkath. He had not broken it or forced it. Yet it was listening. The High Chief entered the arena, his blade shimmering with a humming charge. He sneered at Marcus. "Your trick ends here, human. No beast will save you from me." Before Marcus could reply, the Vorkath moved. It thundered forward, chains whipping behind it, and slammed its colossal frame between Marcus and the advancing chief. The impact shook the sand, its growl low and warning. The High Chief stumbled back a step, eyes wide with rage. The crowd gasped again. To see a predator block its master's path was unthinkable. The chiefs above barked and cursed, but their words had no weight against the sight in the arena. Marcus lifted a hand, resting it on the Vorkatha's shoulder. "Not yet," he murmured. The beast stilled, rumbling but holding position. The restraint was more powerful than violence could have been. It told every onlooker that the human's will alone had stilled the beast's fury. The High Chief roared, slashing with his blade. Sparks showered from the Vorkatha's armored hide. It bellowed, snapping its jaws, but Marcus stood firm, voice sharp this time. "Enough." The predator froze, jaws quivering inches from the chief's body. The alien stumbled back again, teeth bared, but his eyes betrayed something Marcus had not seen in him before: fear. Above, the other chiefs had seen it too. Their authority was cracking. For generations they had ruled by binding predators through chains and fear. Now a human had shown he could command them with nothing but presence and trust. If that truth spread beyond the arena, the chief's entire reign would be questioned. "Kill him," another chief bellowed, pointing a clawed hand toward Marcus. "Kill the beast. Burn them both." The order unleashed chaos. Dozens of soldiers poured into the lower tunnels, bringing with them mechanized war beasts, towering constructs of steel and plasma, designed to dominate even predators like the Vorkath. Their eyes glowed with artificial fire as they stomped into the arena, weapons humming. The crowd roared in bloodlust, half in terror, half in anticipation. Marcus knew he could not stop what was coming. The chiefs would sacrifice anything to erase this humiliation. The first war machine charged, claws of plasma slicing the air. The Vorkath met it head-on, the impact a thunderclap that sent shards of stone flying. Sparks erupted as metal clashed against living armor. Marcus threw himself aside, sand spraying as the smaller predators lunged at the flanking machines. The arena descended into a storm of chaos, metal shrieking, beasts roaring, the crowd screaming above. Marcus scrambled to his feet, heart hammering. He could not fight with claws or plasma, but he could lead. He shouted across the sand, his voice cutting through the din, "Stay with me." The Vorkath bellowed in response, smashing the machine to the ground with one colossal strike of its tail. The second machine advanced, cannons glowing, but Marcus sprinted directly into its path. The crowd gasped. Madness, they thought. Yet he dove aside at the last moment, forcing the machine to turn, exposing its flank. The Vorkath seized the opening, tearing into its core with a roar. Fire and metal erupted skyward. The chiefs above shouted for more reinforcements, but panic was creeping into their voices. This was no longer spectacle, it was rebellion taking root. The crowd, once bloodthirsty for the human's death, now chanted in awe, their voices shifting rhythm. Some shouted his name. Others simply roared in time with the predators. Marcus stood in the sand, chest heaving, blood dripping from his torn arm. He raised his voice not to the chiefs but to the thousands watching. You see it with your own eyes. These creatures don't bow to chains, they bow to choice. They fight because they choose to. The Vorkath roared again, bowing its head briefly at his side. The image seared itself into every witness's mind, the galaxy's deadliest predator lowering itself to a man unarmed. The chiefs were unraveling. They barked orders but their soldiers hesitated, their machines faltered, and the predators turned feral at their touch. Authority was bleeding out of them moment by moment. The High Chief screamed in fury, lunging once more at Marcus. His blade swung wide, desperate. The Vorkath intercepted him, pinning him to the sand with a single massive paw. The crowd fell silent, breathless at the sight. Marcus stepped forward, standing over the High Chief, the weight of the predator's claw pressing the alien into the dirt. He could feel the moment crystallizing, the fragile edge between triumph and slaughter. He spoke loud enough for all to hear. This is humanity's strength. We don't conquer by chains or blades. We endure, we trust, and in return even the strongest stand with us. The Vorkath growled as though affirming his words. Above, the other chiefs clutched their weapons, torn between pride and the fear growing in their eyes. They could not allow this to end here. They would gather, unite, and strike as one, even if it meant plunging the arena into blood. Marcus saw the decision forming in their glares. The Vorkath shifted beside him, muscles tensing. The smaller predators flanked him now, no longer uncertain but protective, their eyes fixed on the chiefs above. The sand stilled. The crowd hushed. The next clash would not be against machines or beasts, it would be against the full wrath of the war chiefs themselves. The arena was a furnace of silence, heavy with dust and tension. The High Chief still writhed beneath the Vorkath's colossal paw, its claws dug just deep enough to remind him of mortality. Above, the remaining chiefs stood rigid in their balconies, their jeweled armor glinting in the glow of shattered war machines and smoking sand. Their eyes burned with venom, but also with unease. The sight before them had unmade centuries of tradition in mere moments. A predator, the galaxy's symbol of domination, obeying a human. Marcus Hale felt the weight of that truth pressing down on him. His arm throbbed with pain, his body ached from blood loss, but none of it mattered. He could not falter here. If he faltered, the moment would crumble and vanish, swallowed back into tyranny. One of the chiefs finally broke the silence, his voice booming with desperation. This is deception. A trick of pheromones, chemicals, technology smuggled by his kind. Kill the human, burn the beast, and restore order. The crowd muttered, shifting like a tide against rocks. Some shouted agreement but more jeered at the chief. They had seen the truth with their own eyes, and the chief's denial rang hollow. Marcus drew a ragged breath, lifting his gaze to meet them all. His voice carried, strained yet unwavering. You rule through fear. Through blood. But look at them, look at your beasts. They are not broken. They are not slaves. They choose where to stand. And today, he laid a hand on the Vorkath's scaled shoulder. They stand with me. The predator bowed its massive head lower, a gesture of acknowledgement. The smaller beasts echoed with guttural growls, forming a living wall around Marcus. The crowd erupted, not in confusion this time but in raw thunderous approval. For the first time in generations the chant rose not for a chief, not for a battle but for a human's name. Marcus, Marcus, Marcus. The chiefs' faces twisted with rage. They drew their weapons as one, leaping from the balconies in a display meant to cow their people. Their armored forms crashed into the sand, plasma blades sparking, their battle cries shaking the air. It was the final gamble, to kill the human before his influence spread beyond these walls. Marcus's pulse surged. He had no blade, no shield, only the beast that had chosen him. He whispered sharply to the Vorkath. Together. The clash exploded like thunder. The first chief charged, blade swinging in a brilliant arc. The Vorkath intercepted with a swipe of its tail, sending the alien sprawling across the sand. Another leapt high, blade aimed for Marcus's throat, but the smaller predator, a sleek hunter with obsidian eyes, lunged from the side and dragged the chief down in a frenzy of claws. Marcus stumbled back, every movement survival instinct. The third chief was on him in an instant, faster than he could react. The blade hissed toward his chest. He threw up his arm, bracing for the strike, only for the Vorkath to slam its jaws shut around the weapon, ripping it from the alien's grip with an ear-splitting crunch. The crowd was a storm of voices, half in terror, half in awe. Blood sprayed the sand, and still the chiefs pressed on, their fury greater than their fear. The high chief, freed when the Vorkath moved, scrambled to his feet, his face contorted with humiliation. He roared, charging Marcus directly. Marcus didn't retreat. He couldn't. If he retreated now, everything would collapse. He braced himself, locking eyes with the towering alien. In that heartbeat he understood the chief's rage. It wasn't about losing power. It was about losing the illusion that power was absolute. The high chief swung his blade down, both hands gripping its hilt. Marcus ducked beneath the strike, sand erupting as the weapon hit ground. He seized the moment, hurling himself forward. His good hand wrapped around the alien's throat, not in strength but in defiance. The chief snarled, claws digging into Marcus's side. The Vorkath moved like a tempest. Its claws crashed down, pinning the chief once more, but this time with bone-crushing force. Its roar drowned everything, echoing off stone, shaking dust loose from the walls. The predator leaned low, its fangs inches from the chief's skull, waiting only for Marcus's signal. Marcus raised his voice again, the words tearing from his throat. "This is your end, not by my hand but by your own failure. You believed strength was control. You were wrong. Strength is trust. And trust cannot be chained." The Vorkath's growl deepened, vibrating through Marcus's chest. For a moment the chief's eyes flicked from Marcus to the beast, and Marcus saw the first crack of despair. He had ruled countless worlds, commanded armies, but here in the sand he was prey. The Vorkath struck. A single snap of its jaws silenced the high chief forever. The crowd howled, not in mourning but in unshackled frenzy. The other chiefs froze, realization dawning. They were not fighting a man and a beast, they were fighting an idea, and it was already too late. One tried to rally, screaming for loyalty, but the soldiers above did not move. Their weapons hung limp in their hands. The arena was alive with rebellion, voices rising, predators crying out, the air vibrating with the collapse of an empire. The last chief dropped his blade, snarling in bitter defeat. "This changes nothing. Without our chains, chaos will devour you all." Marcus stepped forward, bloody but unbroken, his voice cutting sharp. "Without your chains they'll finally be free to choose. And freedom will devour fear." The Vorkath roared again, turning its gaze toward the chiefs. None dared move. The smaller predators encircled Marcus tighter, their allegiance unmistakable. The crowd surged, voices uniting into something unstoppable. The chiefs, once gods in this place, were now nothing but relics. The arena's walls shook with the chant of thousands, and Marcus knew the moment had come. He raised his arm, ignoring the pain, and pointed toward the balconies where the soldiers stood frozen. "You see the truth. No more chains. No more fear. Stand with me or stand aside." The hesitation broke. One soldier dropped his weapon. Then another. Then hundreds. The sound of armor striking stone echoed like thunder as entire ranks disarmed themselves, choosing the tide instead of drowning against it. The chiefs were undone. Their empire was undone. And Marcus, a wounded human far from Earth, stood in the center of it, surrounded by the galaxy's deadliest predators, who bowed not out of fear but choice. The Vorkath lowered its massive head beside him, pressing its armored brow against his chest. Marcus's hand, shaking but steady, rested there. He looked up at the stars beyond the arena's broken walls. The galaxy had just witnessed its first fracture of tyranny, and he knew this was only the beginning. For the first time he allowed himself a weary smile. Humanity, underestimated and dismissed, had just lit a fire that no one could extinguish. And at his side, the beast that once embodied terror had become the symbol of trust that would carry them forward. The chant rose again, shaking the heavens themselves. "Marcus, Marcus, Marcus,